Welcome everyone to the Asia Regional Conference of the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. As Sylvia mentioned, I'm Pratima Narayan, a Senior Program Manager with the Coalition based in New York. I work on the Bangladesh Rohingya Documentation Project, as well as the program in Sudan. And I'm pleased to introduce to you today, Ms. Rita Izsák-Ndiaye. This truly is an honor. I'm probably not supposed to tell you this, but when I supported the migration mandate with the UN Special Procedures in Geneva, they would always talk about Rita in our staff meetings. Rita this, Rita that, everyone was always talking about Rita. You knew that she was someone important to know in the field, and you knew that she commanded respect. I only met her once in passing, but I knew that she was about her business. As we launched the Women of Conscience initiative, it's important for me to say that Rita is the kind of woman that younger human rights defenders look up to, and the kind of woman that older women rejoice in because they see the promise of the next generation. For those of you who don't know, let me tell you more about Rita. In 2018, she began a 4-year term as a member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Prior to this, Rita served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on minority issues from 2014 until 2017, and was appointed an independent expert on minority issues by the Human Rights Council in 2011. Rita holds a Master of Law degree from Peter Pezmani Catholic University in Budapest, Hungary. She says her work is very much inspired by her own experiences of prejudice and discrimination. Rita's father's family was forcibly moved under post-war population transfers from Czechoslovakia to Hungary due to their Hungarian ethnicity in 1947, and her mother is of Romani origin. Rita has been working on human and minority rights since her university days. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Ms. Rita Izsák-Ndiaye.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I think you can hear me. Can you see me?
Yes, we can hear
you. Oh, you can. I can't see myself. but you can see me. Oh, that's bizarre. Okay, Pratima, you just made me cry. It's 8:30. Was not ready for this. Thank you so much. I literally cried here. I'm trying to get myself together. It's so nice to hear this warm welcome, and I'm truly touched. So I thank you. I didn't know that I was that person that you just described. I thank you very much for being so kind and gracious with your words. And it's actually my honor to be here. I was reading about many of your activities. I also saw many familiar faces in the audience and also on the screen. Mofidul, it's nice to see you. I think it's been quite a few years that we met the last time.
Same for me. It's a pleasure to meet you again.
I miss seeing your face. Yeah, 2020 dealt with us. It's really such a pity that, you know, I just read an article about the future of meetings, and Bill Gates was talking about it, and he said that it's very possible to shift to the online world entirely, and some companies are planning to do it, but he identified one major problem, and it was that he did not make any friends this year. And he said, because all these meetings happen online, you only see some faces, but you cannot connect, you cannot interact with others. And I was thinking about it, like how actually I miss making friends and meeting friends. Because, you know, when there are a few speakers and a few other people in the audience who can take the floor, it cannot replace to actually go and really make connections. So it's such a pity that we spent this whole year so much isolated from each other, when the world just, I think, had to come closer. But while we are trying to hang on and see whether 2021 will give us something nicer and warmer and better. And so when I read about your activities of many of your NGOs and museums and initiatives, I was really touched, because I must say that this is what we need at the United Nations, and we would need more of it. Your own interpretations of what is happening in your own communities, because we are really in dire need of hearing more from grassroots communities. And when I was thinking about today's discussion and on transformative documentation, and what we have to sometimes learn when we interact with others. You know, immediately I had a memory coming back to me from many years ago when I went to work in Bosnia and Herzegovina, into Srebrenica. But it was interesting because I had to look for an apartment in a neighboring town, Bratunac, and I got an apartment on a street called Gavrila Principa. And I remember how shocking it was for me because for us, I am Hungarian. And so for us, Gavrilo Princip was a terrorist who assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and he triggered the First World War. And I remember how conflicted I was, I think I can say, to live on a street which was named after a man that I was brought up to believe that he was a terrorist. And then I had to dig the history narratives in Bosnia and Herzegovina about him. And especially in that region, Republika Srpska, I had to realize, like, for so many people, he was a hero. Of course, I read about, you know, his house that was destroyed 3 times, but was rebuilt 3 times, and about the speeches that were all around his burials and his memorials. And I remember how I had to learn that, yes, my own viewpoint about things is relative, because for some others, it's something completely different. And Pratima so kindly talked about my own experiences being a Roma person in Hungary. And I also reflected on what I actually have learned about my people throughout my education. And I had to realize that it was actually 0. If I think about what I gained as a knowledge about the contribution of Roma to the development of my country, let it be arts, poetry, but even the freedom fighters who fought along with the Hungarian troops, I realized, like, I knew so little. And, you know, we only heard about musicians, but for example, I never knew that my own group, the Roma group that my mother belonged to, they have been slaves in Romania. And until today, nobody talks about that slavery. And there is absolutely no discussion about, like, what happened, and even, you know, reparations. It's just not in the public knowledge. So all this made me think about a very famous speech of someone called Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I can't see your faces, which is a pity, but I would wonder who heard about her. She's a Nigerian writer. She's one of my contemporary, favorite contemporary novelist and author. And she has a very famous TED talk. And if you had not listened to it, please try to find it. You have, Sylvia. Yeah, she has a very famous speech, which is about the danger of a single story. And I think that today and the next days, we are actually talking about it. Like, what is the danger of having one story about a person, about the peoples, about the country? And I can see a link. Thank you so much from Pratima. This is, for me, was a very eye-opening TED talk, because I always knew that there is a problem with stories, but I could not put it as clearly as Chimamanda did, because she breaks it down that, yes, these stories that we hear, like Roma people, the story that we hear about the Roma or the Gypsies, that they steal or they play music or they are fortune tellers. Yes, that might be true. The problem is this is not the complexity of the truths. And that's not all the stories that can be told about the Roma. And so very early, I started questioning everything around me, like how many stories about this people and that people, and about this history and that. And I think this is what we should really try to focus on in the future, about gathering as many stories as possible to avoid the danger of just knowing one story of one people's or one group of people or one person or one country or one ethnicity or one religion, etc. And I also was reflecting about, like, how many times I am invited to conferences to talk about the prevention of atrocities, because we all know here that memorialization is about past, present, and future. So it's about, of course, collecting the memories and what happened, and then remembering and honoring the victims and recognizing them. But it's also about how we build that trust right now and how we build resilient communities. And then, of course, it's the future, which is really our ultimate goal, to secure a peaceful future for all of us. And so I was often asked about how we can ensure that a society holds together and that the people can live with dignity and equality. And when I was thinking about it, you know, what came into my mind is the example of a human body. Because if you think about the human body, and science says it, that to understand how the large operates, we need to see how the little operates. And so there are trillions of cells in the human body, right? And they all come in different sizes and of shapes. But even one, the dysfunction of one can destroy the harmony. And so they all have to work together to keep large. Like, what if we imagine a society as the human body? Who are the cells, or what are the cells? And I would like to believe that these cells are the immediate relationships we have. Now, these can be friendships, these can be civil unions, we can call them marriages, but I think we need to examine what really keeps our relationships going and stable. And so I went into looking at relationship advices. It's very funny, but I think it's very important to understand what is advised to us. How can we live together with our immediate environment? And I will just list you a few. So first of all, they say, do not try to change each other. They say the most successful couples are the ones who recognize and appreciate the differences between them. They also talk about the importance of revisit the past. And now in this community, we don't have to talk about it because we are here exactly because we recognize the importance of this. Number 3 advice is usually always listen to each other and take decisions together. Number 4, if problems persist, approach them differently. Number 5, a crisis does not mean that a marriage or a relationship is over. And number 6, and this is my personal favorite, love is a verb and not a feeling. So now we should try to break this down to a society at large and go through them and understand what each of these advices tell us. First of all, do not try to change each other. It comes back to all kinds of attempts for assimilation policies. In international law and standards, it is unlawful to try to change somebody's culture, religion, identity, or language. Everybody, every minority group has the right to be his or her, a person's identity promoted and protected. And protecting is the minimum. Promoting is a little bit more. It's about education, it's about media, it's about self-representation. But it's also about, of course, good governance. How we have to allow people to have their own kind of arrangements. It can be territorial or administrative or legal, to enjoy, their own identity and their own equality, dignity with others in a peaceful setting. So if you remember, number 2 was revisiting the past. And here, as I said, this is obvious for all of us. We have to go back together to what happened. We have to understand together what this meant to us. And it is not always a possibility to convince each other, but at least the recognition of our different understanding of things. And the tolerance and respect that comes with acknowledging the differences is really what can make us work and hold on to each other. Number 3 was always listen to each other and make decisions together. And it really is about coming back to democracy, which is a game of numbers. In a democracy, of course, minorities might be not automatically represented in structures because they are minorities, they are smaller in number, and in many cases, they are more disadvantaged than the other communities in the society. So what we need is inclusion policies, sometimes by special measures, to get their voices heard. And I don't know whether we have Indians in the audience, but I always like to quote Arundhati Roy, who said, there are no such thing as the voiceless, because people are deliberately silenced or preferably unheard. And I always say this because I think it's so important for us to remember that people have a voice If they are not listened to, it's because of a choice, and it's not because they have nothing to say. So we have to make sure that everybody can participate in decision-making processes. Now, number 4, if problems persist, approach them differently. I find this really interesting in the level of society. This is when art comes in, culture comes in, different innovative interpretations, and especially youth. This is when we have to listen to all kinds of constructive and sometimes unconventional solutions for the society's problems. Number 5, a crisis does not mean a marriage is over. And I like that because it means that we have to settle disputes. We have to find a way to move on. And this is when transitional justice processes, truth-seeking, reparations, and reforms come into the question. And then, as I said, my personal favorite is the last one. Love is a verb, not a feeling. Now, what does it mean? It means that in every relationship and in every society, we have to actively maintain these positive attitudes. We cannot at any point of history sit back and say, our society worked it out. We know how to live with each other. You know, maybe we have been through a conflict, but now we learned from it, and now it seems like everything is okay, because this is very often on the surface. What this means to me, that love is a verb and not a feeling, is that we actively have to support each other constantly, to check on each other, to check on different society groups, to different communities, to make sure that they are okay. It's not just about a passivity of hoping that things go well, but it's about an active engagement on a constant structural way to make sure that everybody is living that life in equality and dignity on a daily basis. And so there are a few technicalities. I think I will have to stop very soon. I won't go into details, but you know, in international law, we talk about, first of all, of course, the need for a constitutional legislation, which would enable a conducive environment for enjoying the rights. But then I like to talk about mechanisms and structures and institutions, because what I realized during all my travels to many countries, also affected by conflicts and war, the problem is that there are no dedicated mechanisms for coexistence and for peaceful relationships, or for community relations or minority protection. If you have no mechanisms, who is in charge to enforce the laws? And who will take care of this communication and trust building with the communities? So I would really want us to also think about the importance of mechanisms and structures to be in a country. And I will close now, because I think you might have some questions, by saying that as I started, the United Nations need your voices. Please never underestimate the importance of your single voices, because the UN is just as strong as people tell us their own stories. Imagine that we, as the members of treaty bodies, we literally sit in Geneva. It's an ivory tower. We sit in a palace in one of the most developed countries, one of the most developed cities and the best place in the world. And we have to assume and understand what happens in a country when we examine a country. How can we do it? Of course, only by reading and hearing from people on the ground about what's going on, because we will receive the government report. But if the NGOs do not submit us parallel reports about how they see and how they perceive the government's performance, we will not be able to ask the right questions, and we will not be able to come to the right conclusions. And it's very difficult to travel to Geneva, but there are some organizations that facilitate the attendance of civil society to our meetings. And as I mentioned, you can also submit your reports. You can help us with follow-ups. I also want to just quickly call your attention to the fact that we have early warning mechanism at my committee. So if a community or group of people, a minority group, is in danger, you can come to us and seek protection. We are not that fast, but as soon as we can, we get in touch with the governments in concern, and we push for solutions, and we show them that we have an eye on the situation and they cannot do whatever they want to do. And we also have individual complaint mechanisms. So if something happened to you as a person and you exhausted the remedies in your country and you're not happy with the results, you can come to us. And so we can be very useful. So please don't see the United Nations as, people who are sitting in fire and only, listen to the leading NGOs. We actually are in need of listening to every single person, and the closer to the ground, the better for us. And I am always so sad when we have a country that we review, and I know that there are issues in those countries, but nobody comes to tell us. And of course, we can Google, we can look into the internet, but it's not the same. So please, if you have a chance, see and seek advices how you can contribute to our work. I'm also here, and I'm happy to respond to questions, and you can also find me later. And I would be really happy if many of you considered how to work with the United Nations in the future, because as the title said, transformative documentation. And for me, transformative documentation also means that you transform your future. And I would like to believe that the United Nations has a big potential to play a role in transforming your future. So please work with us and think about us and trust us. So thank you. I'm sorry, Pratima, I think I was a bit long, and now I pass the floor to all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Rita? Or any comments on anything that she said?
Hello, I am from Sri Lanka. Can I speak, Pratima?
Yes, please go ahead.
No, just from Miss Rita. She came to Sri Lanka. She has visited
I know
office.
you. Yes, yes, I remember. Hi.
Yeah, hi.
How are you?
You came to my office in Kandy. Yeah, just.
I know.
Yeah, you have mentioned that UN is working and help us. But the only thing is, that I have submitted because I represented the minority community who are migrant during the colonial period from India, working in the tea plantation, and also some are scattered in the northern area also. But we submitted, and you also put your report about us, but still the question is pending because still we didn't have that kind of inclusion in Sri Lanka, because now the government is going for a new constitution. So tomorrow we will submit our proposal to the constitution. Do you think that we can send it to you also, that recommendation which we are trying to submit to the constitution proposal committee?
Absolutely. And I'm also thinking about how you could work with the special rapporteurs, because, they are very quick in sending letters to the government, and how they could maybe support your cause. Because the problem with my committee, as you know, that it's 18 people, so we don't move that fast. That's why I was saying, even our urgent action is not always urgent. But I'm very happy to read what you have, and then we can have a brainstorming about how we try to strengthen your case and maybe get some supporting voice. So that you can influence the outcomes. That's a good idea. And please, yes, send it to me. I'm sure but I think also you might have my email address. But I can put it in the chat box right now, and then you have it.
Okay.
So please feel free. You're
nice
very welcome. It's good to see you. Yes, it's been such a long time. You haven't changed though.
Okay, bye.
I think we have time for at least a couple more questions. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to ask Rita while she's here? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Rita, so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to you, Sylvia. Thank you.